In depth now with a good friend of this program, Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson. Of course, Ron's a member of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, as well as a member of the Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs. Ron, we appreciate you phoning in this morning on America's Forum.
Morning, JD. How you doing?
Doing okay, sir. A busy day. We've got Ebola in the news, but we would be remiss if we did not begin with ISIS. What do you make of what Admiral Kirby had to say yesterday about airstrikes?
Well, first of all, I agree that the most airstrikes can do are possibly halt the advance of ISIS. I'm not even sure if they're going to halt the advance of ISIS. Look at how close ISIS is now to Baghdad. So, airstrikes have obviously some effectiveness, but they're certainly not going to achieve the goal that President Obama himself set, which is ultimately defeat ISIS. Obviously I support the airstrikes. We've got to do that, but in the end, we've got to be realistic. We've got to face reality and realize if we're going to achieve the goal, which I support, of defeating ISIS, it's going to require boots on the ground. And I guess we can debate and question which boots on the ground will actually do the work. But JD, in 2007, when we had a surge trying to defeat 6,000 to 8,000 members of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, we had 100,000 Sunnis working with us, 100,000 Iraqi security forces. We had 160,000 American troops on the ground, probably about 35 to 40,000 in the combat role. That's what it took in 2007 to defeat 6,000 to 8,000 members of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Now we got 31,000 or more members of ISIS. They're at the door of Baghdad. They control territory. They have resources. They've got better weaponry. You just got to be realistic.
And with that in mind, is it too late to put boots on the ground to stop that halt into that march into Baghdad?
Well, let's face it, we already have boots on the ground, and so we've got military advisors trying to, I would imagine, whip the Iraqi security forces into shape so they can defend themselves. I think we have some reports of some of those Iraqi security forces acquitting themselves quite well. They've got some elements there of special ops, so hopefully for the time being they can hold off ISIS. But again, it is very unwise for any commander-in-chief to take any action off the ground that might be necessary to achieve the stated goal. You do not commit the finest among us, America's military, to combat if you're not 100% committed to victory. And that has always concerned me, whether it was in Afghanistan during the surge that President Obama announced and then at the same time announced the withdrawal. That's no way to win a war.
Ron, a couple of minutes left in this segment. We would be remiss if we did not take a listen to what the vicar of Baghdad, Canon Andrew White, said yesterday in speaking to Sky News from Baghdad, a first-hand account of what's happening on the ground. Let's take a listen.
I have never known the city like it is at the moment. There is immense fear amongst everybody. People are too fearful to even leave their homes. And so we are at a crisis point.
And you hear that, and we think about ISIS and its march with its brand of Islamism. Ron, it's not sowing the seeds of panic to put two and two together and say that we could see persecution of Christians in Baghdad and more sectarian strife among the Muslims themselves. Yeah,
JD, what we're facing here is evil. What we have to defeat is evil. We have to defeat barbarism. And it sounds like President Obama is finally facing that reality. The reality that he's been denying. He believed his own rhetoric, his own narrative for far too long that core Al-Qaeda was defeated, that the war on terror was over, that Al-Qaeda was on the run. It just wasn't the case. And elements of the government fully understood that, fully knew it. He was being warned over a year ago. But now we're facing that reality, and the problem with this president is his strategy has always been one of leading from behind, trying to achieve peace through withdrawal. He's always been, in his actions, has always been too little, too late. Let's hope it's not the case in this situation.
Ron, as I hear you mention that, I guess we could call it the doctrine of restraint. Let's keep that in mind. We're going to step aside for a couple of minutes. When we come back, Senator Ron Johnson on what we could describe as Mr. Obama's doctrine of restraint. That's what we'll talk about, among other subjects in the news, as we continue with Senator Johnson here on America's Forum. Please stay with us.